Okay, let's say that you're going to conduct a lab experiment in which you're going to collect data from a number of different students or even from a number of different classes. It might be useful for you to know how to collect lab data using Google Forms and Sheets. First thing that you want to do is to sign into your account, then go to the app launcher and launch your Drive. Once you're in Drive, you want to click on the New button. When you do, you don't see a Google form there, but that's what we want. So click on More and open up a Google form. Now this will create an untitled form. So the first thing that you might want to do is give your form a title. Say Pulley Lab Data Sheet. And then give your form a description. It's not necessary, but if you want, you can give your description there. And then the first set of questions might be simply to collect student data so you can identify particular things about the student who is submitting the data. So you might try of course, this is something that you want to require of the student to answer, so make sure that you check the box there. And then let's add another text question for first name. Again, required question by clicking that. And let's scroll down a bit. One more, let's say that we'll take the student ID. Alright, now that might be all of the demographic data you need to identify whose lab sheet this is. You may want to add something else like class or day or something, but that will be particular to the individual lab that you're doing. Okay, next thing that you might want to add. At this point you may want to give the student some instructions about the lab. You may want to show them how to set up the lab. So if you click on the Add Item, you can add an image to the lab sheet. I've got an image in my Google Drive that I think I want to use. We're going to do a lab dealing with the mechanical advantage of some aspect of pulleys. So notice we've got our last name, first name, student ID, and then we've added an item called the and we're going to size it just a bit to be quite that large, and we'll go ahead and center it on the page, and we'll give our image a title, pulley. So students will know how to set up the pulley. And just in case there are some screen readers, we'll put some text in here. We'll call this Pulley Lab 1. That way if someone's using a screen reader, that will give them the screen reader something to read there. Alright, so there's our instructions on how to set up the lab. Now let's go ahead and do our data input items here. And the first thing we're going to have is, let's create a data question, and we'll call this the output data. And a little bit of instructions here. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to suspend the weights and pulley block from the spring scale and record the weight as the output force. So we put our help text for that particular data point there. Again, we want to require an answer, and we'll add the next item. Next item we'll add will be called the number of strings. and a little bit of help text on how to determine that number. So you're going to build block and pulley arrangements, CB above, just simply giving instructions as to what they're going to do. Again, we want to require a data point here. And let's add one more, complete the lab. We'll call this our input force. And a little bit more help text here we'll use. Okay, attach the spring scale to the open string and da da da. That will give us the instructions that we need. One more time. Let's click that as a required question. And at this point I think we have enough just to demonstrate our topic here. And so we want to look at a couple more things before we log out of this. Alright, now because they may be entering multiple responses to this lab, we're going to leave it so this check so that it will show a link to submit another response. We're not going to publish and show this as a public link to the form results because we'll do that as another step later. And allow responders to edit responses after submitting. I tend not to use that. Just have them enter another data point and we can clean up the data afterward that. Alright, these other form settings at the top, usually use the default on this. Now we're going to have multiple responses from each person. If you wanted to have a single response, you could check that, but they would have to log in with some type of demographic data. I think you have to use your Gmail account there, but and if this were a quiz or something, you could shuffle the question order, but we want the order to be the same for each of the lab data sheets, so we don't want any surprise given to them on this. Alright, so we can then, if we want to do a little bit of we can go a little bit of customizing. We can go to change the theme. I believe there is a lab or a science type of theme somewhere in the list, and just scroll down here. Okay, so for example, we can add that theme to the, notice it changes, sets up the format with a little bit different text. You can see your data points here, where they enter the data, and the instructions for the lab here. Okay, and then we can go back to editing the questions here if we need to, after we've looked over the lab and see that it's just fine. Then what we want to do is, at that point, we're ready to activate the form for collecting. Now there's a number of ways in which you can do this. One, if you have a web page, you can embed the link on your web page. Another way is to click the short URL, and you can actually put this on the board in the classroom, or again you could put that as a link into a web page and direct the students to find that particular form. Okay, and once you have that and you've created that particular form, then you can click done. And that's all there is to setting up the lab data form. So now we have our data form, but let's see the magic that happens behind this data form. While you were generating the data form, there is a spreadsheet that was created that has fields for the data that gets collected. Okay, so this is automatically created when you create your form. So now when someone enters data into the data form, and then so they put in some data, 10.1, Springs 1, 1, and then submit. You can see that there's a link for the person to submit another response if there's another data set native point that needs to be entered. And then when we look at the data, we can see that the data moves into the spreadsheet. And so then after your lab is completed and all the data is collected, you can share this spreadsheet out to the rest of the class. Okay. Now what you can do is get a link, and you can copy this link and share this link to this spreadsheet, but we don't want to share it just as it is. What we want to do is we want to edit the link before we share it out. And this is the link that you'll get if you copy and paste that link. Now what this does, it will give them a link to the original spreadsheet, but we don't want them to have the original spreadsheet. We want to force them to make their own copy. So what we want to do is to delete everything from edit on and type in the word copy. Now this is the link that we want to share, and however you want to share it, in a website, providing a link to them in their through an email, however you want to paste out the link, but this is the one that we want to share. So what happens then, with the copy on the end of the URL, it forces the user with the link to make a copy of that document rather than getting the original document. So then when they click that, it will notice it makes a copy of the PulleyLab datasheet in their Google Drive. Then they can go through and do the editing on this particular spreadsheet and do the analysis, and every student will have their own copy of the data. So that hopefully will help you if you decide to do a lab in which you're collecting a large amount of data from various sources, or from sharing data between classes or between students in a class.